Today we're reacting to the V&A Museum in Dundee. I think the V&A was quite a controversial one. There was obviously the where's it going to go, the V&A outpost outside of London, what happens, and Dundee secured it. Fair play to Dundee, it's a major coup to get that kind of outpost, that kind of cultural institution there, and then a competition run to decide who would design it. The problem with competitions is that you can then see what the other competitors came up with. That means everyone has an opinion and people prefer other options or would have preferred a little bit of or a mix of and things like that, and that gets quite challenging, doesn't it? I think this is one of those buildings where it's a really stunning graphic, it's visually really striking. I suppose more and more now, post kind of Guggenheim and Bilbao, we think of building as emblem a lot. So for a cultural institution, the idea of the building being so visually linked to the organisation so that people just recognise the silhouette, they know what it looks like, it instantly is recognisable to them. Think of things like the Louvre in Abu Dhabi and things like that. We didn't used to do that. We used to have a building that contained and it was the objects in it that were of interest. And now we've moved into this era, which as an architect I think is amazing, but we've moved into this era where the building is almost as important as the content, isn't it? And in that sense, I think the V&A is really successful. It's so striking, it's so impactful. The way it sits against the water and reflects. Now I think it was meant to be actually in the water and much less connected to the land, but as often is the case, budget gets in the way. But you've got that really visual, strong graphic, and it's really, the kind of horizontal lines within it, the kind of angular shape where it looks like it's kind of like an iceberg or like a huge piece of stone sat in the water. The challenge then is, does the inside work as well? You get some really odd spaces as a result of the shape. There's a couple of, the entrance and arrival spaces is vast, but quite empty almost in a way. So I think visually it's really impressive. I think culturally it's really important. I'm not quite as sold on the interior and necessarily all of the exhibits, but as a building kind of on its own, I really like it actually. I think there's something really exciting about it. Buildings like this, I suppose, aren't meant to fit into the landscape, are they? They're not meant to be part of the townscape. It goes back to that thing about building as emblem, doesn't it? They're really meant to be a kind of pronounced piece that stops you in your tracks, that makes you look. They're a destination, partly because of who built them, partly because of how they look, partly because of the impact they have, partly because of what's inside them and the purpose. And in that sense, I think it does everything it's meant to do. It's really strong, it's bold, there's no hiding it. Nobody comes around that kind of main road in along the water and asks where the V&A is. It's not tucked behind anything. And I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking for really strong visual presence. I mean, building on water is a nightmare, isn't it? It's one of those real challenges when you try and use the water as part of the design. So it's about the reflection, it's about how it sits, but also you've got to then stop the water being there in the first place so you can build it. So you start damming and you start working within that. You've got to design a building that effectively will cope when it's flooded around it. And normally we try and keep the water out of our buildings and we keep the buildings out of the water. So doing it the other way around is challenging. I know there was huge challenges around budget, the complexity of the build. We don't typically build massive concrete structures in water in the UK, certainly not as buildings. We do dams, we do infrastructure projects, but they're very different. So to do a combined something that's got a kind of real public sense of civic pride, that's going to be a container for art, for objects, for kind of museum pieces, but at the same time is in that really challenging environment of what's the most difficult place to build. Well, it's in the water, isn't it? So not for the faint-hearted. So the architect for this one was Ken Kuma, kind of chosen at international competition level. Kuma does some amazing buildings. He kind of operates in a different level, kind of different orbit really, in some senses. They do, these grand cultural buildings or massive stadiums. I think he did Japan's national stadium from memory. Kuma Towers. So there's scale, there's kind of drama, there's these huge kind of projects. But again, there's some elements of kind of typical Kuma style, I suppose. But something like this, it doesn't look really anything like the rest of his work because it can't. It's just got to be so individual and so kind of its place and for its purpose.
What would you have done differently?
What would I do differently about this one? Again, I think the exterior is really bold, and whether you would do it that way yourself, I think it works. I think it does what it's meant to do. I think if I was worried about the numbers, I probably wouldn't have built it in the water. But equally, I love the original concept where it was much further out and much more about a building floating in the Tay almost. You know, the Tay's so emblematic of Dundee, isn't it? Where I would look differently would be inside. I think the interior spaces and how they link and connect. To me, they feel a little bit like the interior has really been driven by that external visual and graphic. It reminds me a bit maybe of, say, some of Gary's work, where externally they are so beautiful and playful and exciting, but internally you feel a little bit like you're kind of living with the consequences. And I think that's what the V&A feels like a little bit in Dundee to me. So I would have looked differently at the interior and how it worked and how it interacted.